You're watching ChillyBoy Productions. I'm Larry ChillyBoy Chilson, and this is our Pride Month series review for Pariah. And joining me for this special Pride series review, I have Alexis Gentry. Hello, Alexis.
Hey Larry, thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you for joining me. So, if you're not aware, this is a series on the channel that I bring back every year for the month of June, where I get special guests on to watch and discuss LGBTQIA plus cinema that we have not yet discussed here on the channel. And oftentimes we have not actually watched. So that's usually the fun of it, is getting to experience, discover these queer gems. So, Pariah is a 2011 film from director Dee Reese. The film follows teenager Alike, who lives in Brooklyn's Fort Greene neighborhood with her parents and younger sister. A lesbian, Alike quietly embraces her identity and is looking for her first lover. But she wonders how much she can truly confide in her family, especially with her parents' marriage already strained. When Elike's mother presses her to befriend a colleague's daughter, Elike finds the gal to be a pleasant companion. The film stars Adepero Oduye as Alike in our leading role, Asha Davis as Bina, Sarah Belesse, and Charles Parnell. So, Alexis, I'm going to kick things off with you. First off, had you ever seen Pariah before?
I hadn't, and I'm surprised because when I looked at my letterbox, a bunch of my friends had given it really high ratings. I was like, "How did this slip by me?" But I thought it was a really beautiful film. So I was so glad that this was one you suggested because it gave me a reason to watch it.
Yeah, obviously, when Dee Reese really started to come up to more prominence in the later 2010s, obviously with like Mudbound, got a lot of critical and even awards acclaim. I remember going back and meaning to revisit Pariah because I was like, oh, hello, queer cinema, yay. And it's just one that, for whatever reason, it seemed to slip through the cracks. And I'm so glad that I finally carved out the time to watch it for this Pride Month. How do you feel about Dee Reese as a director?
Well, I really loved. I feel like this was such like a really intimate story. It felt so natural, but it also was like I felt like we really like got a sort of intimate view of the characters in part because I feel like the cinematography, anytime we have like a lot of close-ups, we have a kind of not like locked off camera, like sort of steady cam shots, it just makes you feel a little bit more like you're there. There's these great like quiet moments for these characters where we have these like tight close-ups and they're reflecting on things and I just feel like it really kind of gets you in their head a lot more. It sort of reminded me a little bit of All We Imagine Is Light in that way, where it's like because of that sort of intimacy of the storytelling, you just feel so invested in these people in the story a lot more.
But looking through the film, it seems that Dee also said this was semi-autobiographical because she herself is a lesbian. She has a female partner currently, and we don't really get to see this film, a Black lesbian film. That's very rare. Honestly, getting queer people in these queer romances is also quite rare. The instances that we get non-white people in leads for queer romance, queer coming of age films is not really all that frequent. So for her to get to tell this story and kind of infuse her own experiences for it, I think you could really feel it as you were watching the film. Like you said, you could understand these characters not just through the cinematography, but even through the screenplay and the performances. I think they all kind of coincide together to feel really authentic.
For sure. Yeah, they feel very, it's like they feel very natural. They feel like very real people. And I think like we sort of see, their pain, their joy, their struggles, their all these different things, but never like like too much of anything. It never feels melodramatic. It always feels very like authentic, very real. And I think that was one of the things that I found so strong about it was like, oh, these feel like actual people you could meet on the street, you know?
And I think that's what works so great with the conflicts in this film as well. Obviously, this is 2011, so we're kind of in, I would say, more of the early stages of really getting these coming of age stories. This is pre, Moonlight, pre Call Me by Your Name, pre all the ones that really got big, Love Simon, bringing it to the mainstream, where in 2025, it's kind of a spoiled way to think, but we've gotten quite a bit of queer coming of age stories now. And you're like, okay, it's another, gay coming out, coming of age story. But this was really early on in that process. And I think it handles all of the conflicts here really authentically. Obviously, we have this young girl. She's 17 years old. She basically is trying to find her girl. She's she has a friend who's like, girl, you're a virgin, sneaking her into this lesbian strip club. I'm like, oh my. But she's trying to get her hooked up, and Arlike is kind of like, I don't know about all this. Maybe not. She has reservations about a lot of these things. And we see when it comes to her home life where a lot of that obviously stems from. So where she presents somewhat confident in who she is at school, she, kind of changes up her look. So she presents as she's like to be seen, still that kind of deep rooted insecurity that comes up with being raised by parents such as this. But how did you feel about Alike as a character?
One of the things I wrote down in my notes was like code switching, because I think about code switching all the time in terms of like, like as a person of color, you have to do a lot of code switching in your life. And then I thought about, okay, we have this character who is a lesbian, so she's got to try to do code switching in terms of that. She's also a woman of color. She's also in this, like in her family life, her school life, she has to be like seven different people all the time. I really loved the way that she was able to kind of give us all of that and sort of through subtlety. We saw obviously like, her changing her clothes, but even like her demeanor, like her entire performance really like shifted to kind of reflect each of those kind of settings. And I thought that was really fascinating. And then on top of that, with her being a teenager, you have this kind of teenage awkwardness where it's like when you're a teenager, you're figuring out who you are anyway, and you're figuring out like how you want to be perceived and, what do you want to do with your life and all these things. So it's like on top of the sort of regular teenage awkwardness, you also have to navigate like all these, sort of difficult situations with your school and your home and your friends and all that. She makes you feel for her immediately because you're like, yep, that's got to be really tough. It's got to just be exhausting, frankly, to have to be so many things to so many different people all the time.
Yeah, and we see it in a really interesting sequence right off the bat. Like they're out, they're having fun, she's with her friend, and her friend is a little bit protective and is like, no, I want to walk you to your door. I want to like go home with you. And she's like, no, you're not coming home with me. As we see later, obviously her mother does not like this friend, pretty much because she's a lesbian. I mean, that's pretty much why the mom is like, no. But also, she kind of has to do her own transformation between like friends being out to getting home and switching up. Like, I was just at the movies, present a little bit softer, present how her mom would like to see her come through the door. How'd you feel about her friend here, her like
Oh,
wing woman?
I loved Laura. I wrote down in my notes at one point in the story, I wrote down, if anything bad happens to Laura, we riot. Because I'm like, she's a person who you can tell she's given up basically like her whole family to be who she is, but she's also incredibly like nurturing, she's protective. She understands that this is a difficult situation for kids in this neighborhood and for, this like she knows what it's like, so she's trying to be helpful to everyone even when she herself like someone should be helpful to her. I just kept being like, but can we get her something? Can she have a win? Like I was like, but Laura's so sweet, like, so I thought she was such a fantastic character. And I love how Alike, like, not like impersonates Laura, but you can see where when she's with Laura, she's trying to like make her personality like Laura. And then when she's with Bina, she's kind of like trying to make her personality fit that. And again, that's that teenage thing of like, you don't really know what your personality is. So you're kind of like, maybe I'm like this, or maybe I'm like this. But I really liked in the scenes with her and Laura how you see her kind of trying to kind of like almost like emulate like Laura's level of confidence in who she is. And it's almost like a fake it till you make it. Like, well, Laura seems really confident. If I do that, then that'll work for me too, you know? So
I'm so glad we got Laura's sister in here. They were struggling, and it wasn't like a great situation for these sisters, but at the least her sister was trying to be this like support system for her. And it's like, girl, we may get thrown out on the street, but I still need you to get your education. Like she was still trying to support her. I was like, I don't want you taking up extra shifts. Like, you can see that her sister also was very much struggling of like, I don't want you to have to take care of all of this. And then we also get obviously this kind of heartbreaking scene of Laura confronting her mother later in the film,
yes.
where I think it's another really relatable thing to queer people who are thrown out, are kind of disavowed by their parents. And it's always this thing of like they're still your parent. So no matter how much you put on this hard front, no matter how much you want to cut people out of your life that have done you wrong, that don't want anything to do with you or treat you poorly, unfortunately for so many people, there's still that underlying like I did this thing. I did what you wanted. I got my GED. I'm doing better. I'm trying. And you're still trying to get like, maybe that will get them to come around. Maybe if I do this, they'll forget that they are, bigoted in this other way. But I thought that was such a impactful scene.
I thought it was really interesting too. Like we get this glimpse of Laura's mom, whereas we spend a lot more time with Alike's mom. And I thought that was really interesting. It's almost like, okay, Laura's mom is Alike's mom like 5 years from now, kind of thing. I think like I special shout out here to Kim Wayans because like first of all, it was crazy when she showed up as someone who like grew up on In Living Color. I was like, oh, that's Kim Wayans. And then she was so good. Like I'm so used to seeing her in comedy and she was
Yeah.
just fantastic here. She's like heartbreaking. It's such a fascinating character because like I wrote down in my notes like this is like literal homophobia in that like this terrifies her and like it's because she's like terrified she's awful about it but you could see that like the motivation is not like hatred necessarily,
Yeah.
it's just a complete lack of understanding and then that clearly freaks her out and then on top of that she's got this situation where she knows her husband isn't faithful and that's a really tense situation, so it's like happy people are not hateful people. She's not a happy person. So there we go. You know what I mean? Like she's gonna take all of this and kind of project it out onto her family and particularly onto Alike. I think that scene where they're having dinner and she's like, "Isn't this food lovely? It's delicious." And she's trying to like pretend like nothing's happening and the whole
Yeah.
family is like, "Dude, like we've just had a blowout." Like that to me was so interesting in that again it's like she's trying to have control over like parts of her life and she's trying to have control over the people in her life and she won't like let anybody be anything other than like what she wants and she's so preoccupied with like what people will think and it just prevents her from seeing the forest for the trees. You know what I mean? Like from seeing her family for what they are and caring for her family for what they are. I just thought she was a really fascinating character because she is essentially like the villain, but she's not presented like in a super cliche way. We're like Alike where we're like, we get it. She's her mom. Like she loves her mom. She just wishes her
Yeah.
mom like would understand her. And we do too, you know?
Yeah, I think that that was one aspect that Dee really handled beautifully was this mother character that obviously you're frustrated with because of the way she behaves. But we get so many small glimpses, like this scene of her sitting alone at lunch at her job, like these small glimpses of this woman who is kind of feeling isolated everywhere and doesn't make friends easily, doesn't have a big social network in and of itself. She has her family. So we see her kind of hyper hone in and hyper focus on her family because that's what she has. And then yeah, this estranged marriage that she's in, and you can feel that right from the beginning of this film. And it all comes out. And obviously, all of that on top of whatever we obviously established they're Christian, they go to
Mhm.
church, that type of thing, all of that belief system added on top of all of this. She's trying to change both of her daughters or like morph them into like these perfect little women to send out into the world. And like Alike tells her in that like big blowout, it's like, you've always known. Like, I mean, come
Mhm.
on, you two have known. What are we doing here? And
Totally.
she does know. And you can feel her just fighting it and trying to take it over the entire film. It's like this struggle of this mom literally trying to change her daughter of put this on, even down to like you can't wear pants when you're leaving this house and you can't wear that shirt. You need to go change. And then you have this dad who's also an interesting character because he's initially kind of as hard-nosed against it as the mom, but he comes around very fast. He makes the initial flip of like, all right, girl, come on back home. That your mom will come around. You're welcome here. And his character and his kind of relationship is interesting with these kids as well, particularly because Alike hears him on the phone with someone else. I think he kind of knows she knows in that moment. It's like a weird
Yeah,
like
it's like dad's got his own stuff that he's dealing with too, you know?
yeah.
Like,
And we get like this denial shattering moment in this store where they encounter another lesbian, which apparently we have a poppin' lesbian scene in this neighborhood. They moved into the neighborhood, if whether these religious parents knew it or not, because there was a ton of lesbians in this area. No wonder they opened a strip club there because they were all congregated here. There were so many. They were
market
out
research
partying
shows that, this is where you should do it.
because they were out in the streets. Like it was, that was another interesting thing for me is it wasn't like they were hiding away or most of these women were not like ashamed. Like I said, they were throwing parties in the street with their cars. Like, yeah, we still have these homophobic men, but you heard that woman was not intimidated by this man when he came up to her talking crazy in that convenience store.
I
She
thought that
was
was
not. She's
so
like,
interesting. Again, it was one of those things. I think in my notes I wrote down straight men once again in everybody's business,
and then want to be scandalized and make the like shocked Pikachu face when they
right?
get told off, like when she one
Exactly.
ups him and his own friends have to laugh at him because she just read him, like she just clowned him, and he's
For
all
real.
mad. Suddenly he's talking about people's daughters, he's side-eyeing people. It's like, sir, you brought it on yourself.
Yeah,
Don't
exactly. It's like this was not a conversation until you made it one, sir.
like, okay. Yeah, so I was like, okay, we got lots of people out here just popping in these streets. It was just a very interesting dynamic. So how'd you feel about the father in this parental unit?
Yeah, he was really fascinating too, because I think he was, he seems more sort of sympathetic and he's certainly more like lenient. The mom is very strict, but I also thought that was kind of interesting in that the mom is always like, wait till your father gets home. It's a very like gender politics type of
Yeah,
like the dad is whatever, but it's like, but he's totally not. Like the mom is actually the one that's all that. But again, she's so like in those traditional kind of roles that even though he really in power in his own house, she's very like, your father will deal with this, which is kind of like, no, he won't. You know what I mean? But so I thought that was really like interesting as well. I liked how he kind of came around quickly, but I thought it was interesting. Like, essentially, when there was that scene where she was like, oh, I like someone, and she was asking him about stuff. And then he turns around and he's like, so what's his name? And I thought that was really interesting in that, like, even the parent who kind of understands her doesn't really understand her. But with the dad, I get the sense that it's more like because he's doing his own stuff going on. Like it's almost like he's not paying attention enough like to really understand her. Like and then when he kind of starts paying attention, he does. And he's kind of like, "Oh, okay." Like and he kind of does come around to it. But it's almost like with both of his daughters, he's kind of disconnected. So he's supportive in the way like, "Oh, he's a dad and he loves them and all that." But he doesn't really like know them like that. And so I thought it's almost like, okay, if the mom is going to constantly fight against them and want to mold them, the dad is kind of like, hey, it's cool. They're whoever they are. Whoever they are, I don't really know, but they're whoever they are. It's like he doesn't know who they are, but he's like, yeah, great.
Yeah, like that church outfit scene. Like he agrees with the mom basically just to shut her up. And he's like,
Yeah.
"This is not a battle I want to fight." Like she
Yeah,
is
he's very like pick your
again.
battles. Yeah, I think
But
that's the thing too. That's where you get the sense of the strain in their marriage is that like the mom fights on everything all the time and the dad just seems like he's burned out on fighting with her, so he just kind of appeases her, which is also kind of like as you start to see their relationship more, you start to be like, "Oh, it's not just like a hey, whatever your mom says goes." It's like a I don't care, whatever your mom says goes.
and even then he does like a somewhat compromise of like leave it untucked. Like is it finally
Hmm.
okay, shut up already, leave her alone. Like we got her
Totally.
to change.
Yeah,
Like but
exactly.
he didn't really care. He's like, you look fine the way you are, sure.
Hmm.
I go into church however you want.
Yeah, he's like, whatever, I'm not going, so I don't care.
And then I think this film handles sexuality in a very interesting way. So it starts early. We have these girls kind of just talking in this like little, I don't know, it's like a shop plaza, like outdoor plaza type thing with all these little shops. And they're initially talking about boys, and then they start talking about studs. And one of them is like, I kind of think they're cute. Maybe I would try it. I don't know. Let's see. And she makes like a little hint at like, I like girls, but I love boys, which, again brings a leak to be like, oh, okay, let me replicate my friend's energy a little bit more. She's not comfortable doing anything further than that, and fumbles the bag when we get there. But she tried. It was a growing process for her. But I thought this instance was a really interesting look at sexuality and how, some people just kind of view it as have fun. I'm gonna do what I want to do.
Yeah,
If you
I thought
think
that
you're
was
cute,
really interesting, especially given like the time period of this movie. I feel like that would be a scene that would be so much more common in a movie now. Because I feel like we've just like as a society, we're like, well, yeah, that's more common, like,
no.
but I think I thought that was really interesting too. Like, you have kind of like because of like the socioeconomic status, because of like the racial background of these characters, you don't really expect this girl to be very like, or boys or girls or whatever, like it's that just feels like very I was like, wow, okay, cool. Like in 2011, like I'm surprised. But I also think too, some of it is like, I thought it was interesting because everyone is like young, like they're teenagers or they're like around that age. It's kind of like a thing too with teenagers of like, you like flirting, you like, ooh, somebody likes me, you know what I mean? And it's like for, I think a lot of teenagers is like, well, I don't really know what I like, but I like being liked. So I think that was kind of an interesting thing that we saw a few times here. And I think even like with Bina, it was like, she liked that like Elike liked her. And I think that was a lot of their relationship. She felt like, well, I know she likes me, and I think that was part of it too, which I think is a very authentic thing to like teenage years. That was kind of an interesting sort of story, like in a coming of age story, like an interesting aspect to have, because I feel like that's very teenage coming of age type of accurate.
So that was like quite the turn. The mom forcing her daughter because she wants her away from that horrible lesbian friend that she's around, pushes her to befriend
And
this
then it's like,
like co-worker's
surprise.
daughter
Yeah.
and ends up pushing her into her first like full-on experience.
Right.
It's like, okay, see, always judging people by the look on the
Yeah,
outside.
exactly.
And but that was also, as you said, and so we start with that first little girl at the beginning, kind of just flirting, cutesy, and then it evolves into this other relationship that we get that takes up the second half of the film, basically. And we're flirting. You can kind of feel a tension as they're hanging out more. They're starting to, particularly Alike is putting her guards down, but they bond over music, which I thought was a really fun, again, very teenager thing. Honestly, it's a very general thing. I think a lot of us are like, oh, you like this person? Me too.
Totally.
Obviously, you and I were the type of, oh, you like this movie?
Yeah,
You like
exactly.
films? Okay.
We compare Letterboxd and we're like, okay, hold on now, you know?
Yeah. And she kind of tries to school this girl. She's too cool, all that indie artist. And this girl's like, hold up now. Like, let's not get crazy, ma'am. Let me show you something real quick.
Yeah,
And they
when she was
bond
like,
over
I
this
don't like all
thing.
that mainstream stuff, I was like, has there ever been a more teenage thing than this? Than telling somebody, like, yeah, well, I mean, your music taste is cool, but it's like super mainstream. I was like, oh my God, that's every teenager.
So they start bonding, and then she goes in for the kiss, which blows Alike's whole world up. Like, I also love that scene where she literally is like gay panic on the screen. Like, she goes into full gay panic mode of like, what just happened? I need to get out of here. I don't know what I'm feeling. She clearly did not pick up the signs from this girl of like, she could even be in the realm of possibility of what I was going to be involved with. Freaks out and leaves, which I thought was a really funny scene. And then she's like, wait a minute though. I kind of want it. Okay, now that I've collected myself, now that I know what could be on the table, unfortunately, it wasn't on the table in the more advanced way that Alike wanted it to. The bond wasn't as strong, reciprocal as she was hoping for. But, she kind of got her first little fling, her first little situationship out of the way
Totally. It
with
was like, who among us has not cried as a teenager because somebody you liked and then you thought it was going to be something and then it wasn't or whatever? Like, I'm like, when she was in her room and she was crying, I was like, this is so, yep, like, we've all been there, girl. We've all been there.
ran home, moody, slammed the
Yeah.
door, just like on the ground, listening to
Like it's always like
music.
the most dramatic thing ever when you're a teenager. You're like, this is the worst thing that's ever happened to anyone on earth, you know?
And then obviously it's compounded by her mother finding out and
Yes.
uh big blow up in the house, which was a pretty violent blow up. I'm wondering how much Dee pulled from her own life and her own experience in this type of thing. Was that mom? She gets violent with her daughter in this
Well, and that's where you can
situation.
tell like it's about so much more than Alike. You know, this is all of her frustration and anger, boiling up, and she's just like channeling it at her daughter. And it's like, girl, you got other stuff you need to deal with because like this,
Therapy.
yeah, totally, totally.
Go to therapy.
Seriously, this whole family, you're like, you guys got to figure this out on your own because this girl
Yeah.
is really smart and really caring, and she's trying to figure it out on her own, you know?
And we get the two different sides of that, right? With these two friends, one who obviously dropped out, wasn't an ideal student, had other reasons that maybe she thought if I fix up my life in all these other ways, maybe I messed up. I can get that love and that validation. And then on Alike's side, she's that model student, this model kid who gets the straight A's, who's well behaved, who doesn't get into all this trouble, has been there for her parents, and still, shows you the flip of the coin. It's still not enough. Like, no matter what, if you're not that vision, if you're not what they're wanting you to be in that moment, it's not gonna be enough. So I think their parallel stories actually worked really well together as well.
Yeah.
And I also love that this story, it ends on a self-assured note for Alike. I feel like she had finally come into her own, but it doesn't end on some sort of fairy tale. She doesn't end up with the girl that she likes and has this thing with. We actually see her with a boy. And so she doesn't get the romantic ending. And she also doesn't get a closure ending with her mother either. It's not as a hard-nosed no. It's not like a never talk to me again, but it's also not good. I mean, she doesn't say I love you to her daughter, or doesn't really acknowledge really what's going on here. Yeah, I thought that was an interesting way to end the film with Alike feeling much more like you can still feel the weight lifted off of her after it's just out there. So it is what it is at this point. It come what may with the parents, with whatever. But it's a realistic ending because this is the way a lot of people's endings happen after you come out, and sometimes it takes many a years for that one or both parents to come around. Sometimes they never come around, sometimes it never happens. But yeah, how'd you feel about that ending?
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting. Like, it feels like she grows up so much between where she starts in the movie and where she ends. And I think like when she was talking about the entire idea of like I'm choosing, like she's making these decisions, which I like, it feels like she's trying out a lot of things in the beginning of the movie and she's kind of trying to figure out like, well, what does she actually want and like where does she want to be? And I think by the end of the movie she's like, okay, well, my relationship with my mom, maybe it'll get better later. I don't know. It's not perfect. It might not be anything, but I got to move forward. And she knows, like, okay, her dad and her sister, and she knows, like, Laura. I thought it was really interesting, too, like, with Laura and Bina, like, she loves Bina. She tells Bina, like, she's into her, and Bina's like, no. And then Laura is like, I love you, girl. And she almost doesn't know how to react, which you can tell, like, from her mom and her dad. When someone just is like, I love you unconditionally, she's like, what? She doesn't really know how to respond to that. So I think we're seeing her kind of start to learn about that as well. And then by the end of the movie, she just seems like she's so much more secure in herself. And she's so much more like, okay, I know that I'm a good person. I know I'm smart. I know I'm creative. I know that I can bring all these wonderful things to the world. And that's what I'm going to do. And whether my mom likes it or she doesn't, that's nothing to do with me. And I think there's just this maturity level that she has by the end of this movie that I really liked. It's not like a happy ending per se, but it is in that she feels more secure with herself. And so to me, that makes it like a very satisfying ending.
I think it really kind of toes that line because, again, so often that was a trope,
Mhm.
particularly around this time, up and through this time, certainly before this time. So many queer stories were just like tragic. Like it was,
Right?
she was just like devastated at the end of the film. But it also wasn't like this overly artificial ending where everything wraps up and is cute. We're happy family. It was just real. It just felt
Yeah, like
an
it wouldn't have felt
authentic.
authentic if suddenly her mom was like, actually, never mind, I'm not homophobic anymore. Like it wouldn't have worked. It's like you can't, that character wouldn't have had that change in the course of this movie. That might be something that takes her years. That might be something that takes her whole life, you know?
Yeah.
And I thought that felt very real. I was glad that it didn't go with the like melodramatic, tragic, something horrible happens, because I do feel like that is very like, we see that a lot, especially it's like, we got the 1-2 punch of like queer stories and people of color and it's like, oh god, is this going to be a tragedy? And I loved that it was like, no, it's not. It's going to feel very authentic and real. It's going to have meaning without feeling like super heavy.
If there were a sequel, I feel like we could get to the point with the mom where she'd be one of those parents who would be like, I accept that you live that way. But just, do you have to bring it into my house?
Yeah.
Like one of those parents, like where they like accept you back into their life and are like, okay, you're my
Hmm.
daughter, but do we have to be gay here? Like,
Yeah, yeah,
do
that
you
kind of
have
like,
to do that right now? Like,
yeah.
no,
Like,
you
well, I'd
can't
like for
bring
you to
your
be here
girlfriend
for,
to,
yeah, like
yeah,
Thanksgiving or something, but could we just not talk about it? Like,
yes,
and it's
yeah,
like eventually, it's going to be a process for her. It's
yeah.
going to be a long process for her.
You've been married to your wife for 10 years and she
Yeah.
still calls her your friend.
Yeah.
Like, oh yeah,
Yeah. Your roommate.
they like never will acknowledge what's really going on.
Yeah.
I kind of wish we got a little bit more with the sister. I think she's maybe the most underdeveloped because again, she is being molded by her mother as well in a very different way. We have that whole like prom scene or homecoming scene, like her getting a date or like that. They're putting those expectations. She just happens to also want a little boyfriend. She clearly knows about her sister. She walks in when she's wearing this strap.
Yeah.
It's a
That's,
white strap.
yeah.
I should like, she's like, you couldn't have at least found me a brown one. Like,
That
what
was
is going on?
great. I love just like the logistics of that was so funny.
I'm unaware of this. Did she wear it out to like, I don't know, like she wore
Yeah,
it
I
to the
thought I was
club?
like I was confused by that as well, but I was like, you know what? Like maybe that's how it works. I don't know.
I'm not versed in this area of the queer landscape, I suppose. But that was an interesting moment. But I did love that the sister walks in and she's like, "You better not tell." And even though the
Right. The
sister's like,
sister's like, I don't care, but I want to use this as blackmail
yeah.
material.
It's like a little sister of like, I'm not
Totally.
actually gonna tell, but I don't need you to know that. I'm gonna still hold it here.
Yeah,
I know I'm not
exactly.
I'm not gonna get you in trouble with mom,
Like I would
but
never tell, but I want you to think that I would, so you'll do what I say.
Yeah, so her relationship there I thought was interesting. I just maybe wish we got just a few more instances with like her and her sister because it felt like even in that dinner, her sister's looking like, "What the hell, mom? You just kicked this girl. She's out on the street, and you're sitting here talking about this food and smiling. Like, what is going on?"
Yeah, it's like the little sister knows the mom is team too much, but the little
Yeah.
sister is also like, look, man, I'm just trying to get through this. I think it's kind of like everybody in the house knows that like the mom is a lot. So it's kind of just like, look, path of least resistance, everybody. Whatever, let's appease her. We don't want to start a war with her because she's,
Yeah.
ready to fight at all times.
I think again, this is a relatable thing to many a queer high school student that they bond with the English teacher.
Yeah.
They're having lunch with the English teacher and just hanging out with them. But I had to laugh when it was like, oh, there
Yeah,
she
I
is
liked,
eating
you
lunch
know,
there.
yeah, we had what was cool was like, I think that's the thing too that separates us from the very like tragic stories is like there were people like Laura, like the English teacher, like these people that really cared about Alike and that were like, you are really smart. Like you really could do a lot of things. Even though her like mom wasn't that, or like, she still had people who were like, well, yeah, you're amazing. Or like, well, yeah, I believe in you. Like the fact that her English teacher was like, no, you could do better than this, like pushing her to like, don't phone it in. Like you're really smart. Do your best. I think that was awesome. I loved that. And it was great that there were adults in her life or there were people in her life that were really supportive of her and pushed her similar. Like her mom was also kind of like her mom was hard with her. Her English teacher was kind of hard with her. But one was hard with her in that I see your potential. I know you can be amazing. And the other was hard with her because it was like, I see your potential, but I want you to be this thing. So I thought that was a really interesting contrast to have there with kind of those two people and those two characters.
And I love that the teacher kind of played a role in just kind of telling her her writing was too superficial, like too surface level. It almost felt like whether the teacher was meaning it like this or not, like accept yourself, like
Yeah,
you
like
can
you're faking
pull
it.
from
Be who you
within.
actually
Yeah,
are. Yeah,
like
totally.
I see who you are, get comfortable in that and pull from that, and then we obviously get the full round moment at the end with that, and I thought it was great. And I think harkening back to your point, that's another great thing within the queer community. It often derives from a traumatic place, unfortunately, but something beautiful often comes out of that, of chosen family, and why that's
Totally.
such an important thing within the queer spaces is this idea of a chosen family, because even if your family is not great, we can find
Yeah,
a
there are
family.
people who love you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like whether they're genetically related to you or not, it doesn't really matter. Like so
Yeah.
I think that was really well done here for sure.
Well, Alexis, did you have any final thoughts on Pariah?
Don't think so. I really liked it. I thought it was just a very like a powerful story, but that was also had like some very humorous moments, very teenage moments. I loved it as like a coming of age because I think, especially for the time period, there are so many sort of tragic stories in here. And I liked that it was like, no, it's like just this teenage girl's journey and it's nothing is too 11 dramatic. It's like it's just kind of yeah, she has a crush on this girl and she thinks it's going to work out and it doesn't. And she has this and she thinks it's going to be this and maybe it isn't. And her mom is whatever. But nothing was like, full scale call the cops level drama. And I quite liked that. I think it felt really natural and I liked that a lot.
Well, thank you so much, Alexis, for joining me to discuss Pariah. Do you want to let people know where they can find you across the internet?
Sure. So the easiest place, as long as TikTok stays around, I'm Trashwire on TikTok, but I'm also Alexis Gentry and Trashwire on Instagram. I'm on Letterboxd, Trashwire. I've been making an effort this year to review every movie I watch, even if it's just a few sentences. And I've been watching some weird stuff, so like it's been interesting. If you follow me on Letterboxd, you're gonna learn all about it. And then of course I am the editor of Trashwire.com, and you can always see all my reviews and all my stuff there.
Perfect. And of course, we want to hear what you thought about Pariah. Have you checked this film out? If you haven't, it is currently streaming on Peacock, so it is readily available if you're looking for a new Pride watch for 2025 and you haven't checked it out before. Go ahead, if you have that Peacock subscription, just hit it up. I think we both heavily recommend it, and it serves as a really interesting, unique, and I'd say pretty important step in the queer cinematic landscape. And if you enjoyed our review, make sure to go ahead, click that like button down below, and subscribe to the channel so that you are always up to date on all of my latest videos, including all of my Pride series reviews for the remainder of June. I love you all so much for your continued support. Mwah! Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye.